There's nothing wrong with being a grown adult and liking Pop-Tarts, okay? I see you. But I believe that we can make them much better. And I feel like I say that in every video, but only because it's true. Let me just start off by saying that this is not a sponsored post. Kellogg's or whoever owns Pop-Tarts is not paying me, although if you guys see this video, please send a check. I don't know why I like Pop-Tarts, okay? I guess it's just a nostalgic thing. I definitely don't eat them for breakfast. It's like a late night dessert food every once in a while. I don't really eat them all the time, but every time I do have one, I'm like, man, I really want to make an upgraded version of this. So here we are. Is there a reason you should make your own Pop-Tarts? 100% yes. Don't tell me that you could just go to the store and buy them, because this version is massively different. But look, I'm not gonna sell it to you. Make it, don't make it, just enjoy the video. And don't forget to subscribe. Love you.
So to get things started off, you're just gonna mix together 3 cups or 429 grams of all-purpose flour with 1 teaspoon or 7 grams of fine sea salt and 1 tablespoon or 14 grams of granulated sugar. And then just mix that together. I did this in a separate bowl. I don't really know why I didn't do it all in the food processor, but you can totally do that if you want to. Then add that flour mixture to a food processor along with 1 1/4 cup or 283 grams of cold unsalted butter that's cut into nice even cubes. Remember, now they don't need to be perfect, but it's good to have them even. That way they get evenly dispersed in the dough, like this. Yeah. Then just pulse that mixture together until you have pea-sized lumps of butter and flour. You don't want them to be too big, but you also don't want them to be too small. Then transfer that mixture to a large mixing bowl, and you can see here the little bits of butter in there. It's not quite blended with the flour yet. You want that separation like that. Now, because pie crust requires such little water, I'm not going to give you a measurement. Instead, I want you to add ice water, like very cold, 1 tablespoon at a time, mixing this mixture with a fork just until it forms a cohesive dough. Not too dry. It should be pliable, but not too wet. It shouldn't be sticky at all. Now you can see here the dough started to get a little shaggy on me and the fork wasn't doing much, so I started using my hands and I very quickly kneaded it together. Now once it came together, boom, it's done. Just knead your dough enough for it to come together. Don't knead it so long that you melt the butter, because you really want that butter to stay as solid as possible. You don't want to incorporate it into the dough too much. Then just take your dough and segment it into 2 even pieces. Shape each of those pieces into a thick disc, and then wrap them in plastic wrap and place them in the fridge to rest for 30 minutes. You just want to chill it down so that butter doesn't melt, and so it has time for the gluten to relax. Now while it's resting, let's talk about fillings. You can fill this with pretty much anything that you want, but I'm going to start with a classic cherry pie filling. Now, I made the mistake of not having a cherry pitter, so I actually pitted 4 cups of cherries completely by hand. So don't do that. Please buy a cherry pitter, and then go ahead and start with 4 cups or 532 grams of any type of cherry pitted, along with the zest of 1 orange, a small pinch of salt, and the juice of half a lemon. And place them in a medium-sized sauce pot set over low heat, place a lid on top, and let those cook and simmer and release their juices until they get nice and soft. Optionally, you can also mash them up with a potato masher. I did that. Then whisk together 3/4 of a cup or 170 grams of granulated sugar and a 1/4 cup or 38 grams of cornstarch. Then add that sugar mixture to your soft cherries and let that cook for about 2 minutes, stirring often until it gets nice and thick. With 2 C's. And that's it, cherry filling, there you go. And we all know our coveted cinnamon sugar mix. Now in order to make that, you're gonna do 1/2 cup or 112 grams of granulated sugar or brown sugar, 2.5 teaspoons or 5 grams of ground cinnamon, 2 teaspoons or 8 grams of all-purpose flour, a small pinch of salt, optionally about 1/8 of a teaspoon of freshly grated nutmeg, and 2 tablespoons or 24 grams of unsalted butter melted, and then just whisk all that stuff together. That alone is addictingly delicious. Now it's time to roll out our dough. Start off by lightly flouring a work surface and a segment of your dough. Then roll it out into a large rectangle until it's about 1/8 of an inch thick all the way through. So nice and thin, but not too thin. Then trim the dough so that you get a 9 by 12 inch or 22 by 30 centimeter rectangle, nice and perfectly shaped. And yes, you can save that scrap dough and re-roll it later, so I would put that in the fridge while you're doing this. Then at the bottom of that rectangle, you're gonna mark a little spot at 3-inch intervals across, just so you know where you're gonna cut. Then using those markers as a guide, cut all the way across the dough so that you get 4 individual strips of dough. Each segment of dough should give you 4 to 5 Pop-Tarts each, so that's a grand total of 8 to 10 Pop-Tarts. Now we're ready to actually fill these bad boys. So first thing you're gonna do is you're gonna brush each strip with egg wash. Now you may wanna do this one at a time if you're gonna go slow, that way it doesn't dry out because you want it to be moist. Then you're gonna add your filling of choice. Now one thing that I do wanna say about filling, so make sure that you don't overfill these. If your filling is sputtering out the side, that is not good. So make sure that you allow at least a 1/2 inch border all the way around your filling, and mind you, we're folding this over the other half. So leave an inch of space between the half and where your filling is, if that makes sense. So with a dry filling like this cinnamon sugar mix, you can add quite a bit as long as it doesn't tear the pastry when you close it. So I would have put even a little more than I have here. Now with jams, I wouldn't go more than about a tablespoon, maybe 2 tablespoons of filling, so just be aware of that. Also, another idea for filling that I really liked was to use already made jam. It's super easy. I used some apricot preserves that worked great in here, so that's another idea. Now once you have your filling in there, carefully fold these over in half so the 2 edges meet and gently seal them, making sure not to leave any air pockets in there. If you do, it's fine, but I would recommend trying to push them out the best that you can. Then just make sure that those edges are nice and super sealed. That's why we brush them with egg wash first. And once they're sealed on all edges and pressed out, you're gonna take a fork and gently press a nice little pattern along the entire edge of each Pop-Tart. Now you can just leave it like that, or you can use a knife to trim the edges to make them nice and straight. Because of how I wanted them straight, so I just used a little bit of trimming, you know, no big deal. Now once all those are done, just pop these bad boys in the freezer for about 10 minutes just to firm up before you bake them. Then place them on a baking sheet lined with parchment paper and brush each individual Pop-Tart with that same egg wash that you did before. Once these are brushed with egg wash, place them in an oven that's been preheated to 375 degrees Fahrenheit or 190 degrees Celsius for 20 to 30 minutes or until they're a nice dark golden brown. Now while that's baking, we're gonna make our optional icing. Again, totally optional, but in order to make it, you're gonna do 1 cup or 131 grams of powdered sugar, and then you're just gonna add water 1 teaspoon at a time until it's sort of like the correct consistency. It should be thick enough that it properly coats each Pop-Tart, but also not so thin that it's like, you know, liquidy. Now once your Pop-Tarts are baked, make sure that they completely cool before you add any icing, otherwise the icing will melt off. Then evenly split up that icing on all of your Pop-Tarts and, you know, add some sprinkles if you want, if you're in that kind of mood, you know. I did, no shame. But do you wanna know what else has no shame? B-roll.
And that is it. So, we made our own Pop-Tarts. If that's not extra and bougie, which are all things that I am, then I don't know what is, okay? You know, there was a lot of trial and error when making this, I feel like, but my camera fell in the Pop-Tart, and then the other batch, there were Pop-Tarts and the icing dried, and I totally forgot to put the sprinkles on before they dried, so it just, I did this for you. For everyone who keeps sending me requests, please know I see all of your requests, and I totally consider every single one of them, and the majority of them are actually great, and I end up wanting to do them, so it works out perfectly. But in regard to that, I will be doing some sort of video about me leaving the restaurant that I was at. But keep sending me what you're making. I love to see what you guys are making. Just send it to me on Instagram, DM me on Instagram, tweet me, whatever. All that stuff is in the description below. Be sure to follow me. But anyway, if you enjoyed this video or you learned something, leave a like, subscribe, and I will see you next time.
So I'm in the middle of shooting these and I walked away for a second with the fan on and I totally fucked myself over here. That's not doing much. You know, I'm really starting to think that these Pop-Tarts are kind of out to get me. You know? I don't know. Just a thought.